will talk about, so it's mostly based on this paper of the archive. It's a new way of looking at spectral curves and tau functions. So let me introduce very briefly. Usually, very often, tau functions are viewed as functions of time. It involves some shifts of time, something like that, d over dtk of that equals something in the right-hand side I'm not going to write, but the important point is that it's a nonlinear equation. Very often also, tau functions that are used in the literature, very often we look for special solutions of those equations, which also satisfy another set of equations, which are like Virasoro, or more generally W equations, W algebra equations. And so the idea is to look at such objects. Well, in my presentation, in what I'm going to say, the times are only local coordinates in a space, in the space, in fact, in the space of spectral curves. And I will shortly explain what I call a spectral curve. So in the space of spectral curves. So in some sense, the tau function is truly a function of a spectral curve, and writing it as a function of time, it's only because you have chosen coordinates. But I would like to define the tau function in a coordinate-independent way, so really intrinsically from the geometry of a curve. So let's say what is a spectral curve. No. Sorry, I mixed. Okay, so what will I call a spectral curve? So let me start from an example. It's just an example. Not all spectral curves can be written like that, but an example, it's typically the locus of solutions of a polynomial equation. So typically, let me consider this set, sigma, let's call it sigma tilde, equals the set of pairs xy, such that a certain polynomial p of xy equals 0. And let's say p of xy is a bivariate polynomial So this is a typical example of spectral curve. It's a subset of C cross C. And you can, let me make a picture here. So typically you will have, so if you plot y as a function of x, it's a multi-valued function. So for a given x, for a given point here, you have several pre-images in the curve. There are several points on the curve that have the same x, and there are several points on the curve that have the same y. So in particular, on that curve, there is a map. There is a map from sigma tilde to C which to a point, to a pair xy on the curve, associates x. And I will call that map x. Okay? So it's a projection of the curve to the base. So x belongs to the base that I will call sigma 0 because it can be, so here it's C, or more precisely CP1, so which is just the compactification of a complex plane by adding the point at infinity. But more generally, my construction will work with general sigma 0 that are Riemann surfaces and not necessarily compact. Okay, so you have a projection. You have also another projection. Well, you could think you have the same projection to the y direction. But in fact, it's more interesting to look not at the function y, but at the one form. So one form, y dx. And y dx, so it's a function multiplied by a differential. And in fact, it lives, so in fact, y dx really lives on the cotangent space to the base, to sigma 0. So very often people do that picture. So you have sigma tilde, which is immersed into this total cotangent space. You have the projection. So this is a bundle. You have the projection to the base, and this is the map x. And here, this is the form y dx that immerses sigma tilde into the total cotangent space. And it's a Lagrangian immersion. So that's usually how a spectral curve is often represented in the literature. No. So, no, this one. So how do you lower the upper board? Sorry. Okay, it's coming. So based on this remark, I will give this slightly more general definition of a spectral curve. So I will define a spectral curve as follows. A spectral curve will be the data of four objects, a surface, a map, a one form, and a fourth object that I will describe later. Okay, so sigma is a Riemann surface, and it's not necessarily compact nor connected. And X is a map from sigma to sigma 0, which is meromorphic. And Y dx is a meromorphic one form on sigma tilde. So, and I will describe later what is B. But so just let me say that if sigma is a compact Riemann surface and X and Y dx are both meromorphic, then necessarily there exists a polynomial relationship. So basically, necessarily there exists a P of xy such that this is the same thing as what I wrote before, but this is more general. So polynomial spectral curves are only a subcase of this. This is more general. Now what is B? Well, in fact, so when I plotted this, X is really a two-dimensional, and Y also is a complex number. So it's really two-dimensional. So in fact, this curve is a complex curve in four real dimensions. It's a one-dimensional complex curve. So one-dimensional complex means two-dimensional real. So it's a surface, in fact. So in R4, this would be a surface, and it's a Riemann surface. And this surface can have a certain genus. So if it is compact, it can have a certain genus. And in particular, so B somehow will be equivalent, more or less, to choosing a set of cycles on that surface. So, but let me say more generally what is B. B is a 1 tensor 1 form on sigma cross sigma. And it's a symmetric 1 tensor 1 form on sigma. So what does it mean? It means that if you take 2 points on sigma, so let's take P, P1 and P2, anywhere on the curve, so it means take any 2 points on the curve, locally, in a local coordinate, B of P1, P2 will be something like dP1, dP2, and it's a tensor product. So meaning it's a differential form of P1 whose coefficient is a differential form of P2, and I will require that it has a double pole on the diagonal. So it behaves like that on the diagonal with a coefficient 1 and let's say plus analytic at P1 goes to P2. So that's what it is. So technically, we would say that B belongs to H0 of sigma cross sigma into the canonical bundle tensor itself. It's a symmetric tensor product, meaning that the coefficient in front of P1, P2 must be symmetric. And it has a double pole on the diagonal. Let me write it this way. Delta is the diagonal in sigma cross sigma. And the 1 here means there is a 1 there. Okay, so that's just one way of writing it. Very often people put a box tensor product, meaning that the canonical, so the one form here refers to the first projection, the one form there refers to the second projection. So you cannot raise and lower at the same time. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. So, and yes, let me just emphasize that when you have a compact Riemann surface, there is not a unique B in general satisfying this. So you want B to have a double pole on the diagonal, and I forgot to say no other pole. It has poles only on the diagonal and nowhere else. And if your surface would be the Riemann sphere, it would be unique. There is a unique B satisfying this. And on a genus G compact Riemann surface, there is basically well, choosing B is more or less equivalent to choosing a basis of non-contractible cycles. So choosing B is more or less equivalent to choosing some basis of A cycles, A1, A2, and so on, and B1, B2, and so on. So choosing B is more or less equivalent to do that when the surface is compact. But more generally, we don't assume the surface compact, so we have much more freedom for B. So now I have said what is a spectral curve. Sorry. Yes. So now that I have said what is a spectral curve, let me just make also a small definition of what is a rescaling. So def rescaling. So I will say that lambda s is just the same curve with the same sigma, the same x, but I rescale the one form, y dx, and I don't rescale b. So it's just the definition of what I call rescaling the spectral curve. So now, one property of spectral curves is that they possess invariance of spectral curves. And they are defined by the topological recursion. So I don't expect that you know what is topological recursion, but it's just a process, it's just a recursive definition that associates to every spectral curve, it associates a sequence of forms that I will call omega g n of s. And omega g n of s, so there are two indices that are integers. The second integer, n, means that it is an n, in fact, a tensor product of n forms on sigma n, a little bit like B was a tensor product of two forms on sigma 2, and it's a symmetric tensor product. It's a symmetric form. So you don't have to know how it is defined, just believe me, they exist. So once you have a spectral curve, you can just press the button on Mathematica or Maple or whatever, and you will get all those forms, at least the first few G and N's. But let me just say what is omega 1, omega 0, 1 of S. It's precisely y dx. Omega 0, 2 of S is B. Okay, so these are two examples. Let me give another example, omega 0, 3 of S. So it's a form on sigma to the power of 3, so it depends on 3 points on the spectral curve, P1, P2, P3. And let me write the definition. It will be a sum over A, I will say what it is, Q, a residue at A of B of QP1, B of QP2, B of QP3, over dx evaluated at q, dy evaluated at q. So you see the numerator is a one form in q times a one form in q times a one form in q divided by a product of two, so it's a one form. So in q it's a one form, so you can compute a residue is an integral. And A are the branch points, the ramification points, so they are the points such that dx of A equals 0. Sorry, dx of A equals 0. A are in fact those points, the points where the tangent is vertical. So this is an A, let's say A1, A2, and so on. So you just make the sum over all of them, and you get omega 0, 3. So you just have to evaluate a residue. It's a very simple formula. So every spectral curve possesses such a sequence of invariants. And just let me mention still that omega g0 is a zero form. A zero form is a scalar, so it's just a complex number. And
when you say invariance of what?
Okay, I don't have time to explain that, but it's invariant under certain transformations. In fact, symplectic transformations, or at least it's conjectured to be. But they have some very beautiful properties that I will not mention today. So just let me say that omega g0 of S, it's often denoted fg of S, that's the usual notation, and it's a scalar. So it's just a complex number. It's a zero form. It does not depend on the point. And there are a few theorems that are useful that I will use in this lecture, which we proved with myself and Orentin in 2007. So one nice theorem is homogeneity, which just says that omega gn of lambda s is lambda to the 2 minus 2g minus n omega gn of s. So omega gn is homogeneous of degree 2 minus 2g minus n. This number of 2 minus 2g minus n, you recognize it's an Euler characteristic, and hence the name topological recursion. Now, now that we have defined those fg of s, in fact, the candidate for our tau function, so candidate tau function will be, and let me call it, for the moment, let me call it not tau, but tau hat, because it's not exactly the tau function for the moment. It's very closely related to the tau function of S. And in fact, for the moment, I will define it only for large spectral curves, so for large lambda. And in fact, I will choose a lambda which is large, and I will call it epsilon to the -1. Or sometimes you can call it h bar to the -1. But epsilon to -1s, it will be defined for the moment as a formal series. So exponential sum of epsilon to the 2g minus 2 plus n, 2g minus 2, g equals 0 to infinity, fg of s. So it means that, in fact, epsilon square log tau is a formal series. It belongs to, it's a formal series in epsilon. So for the moment, my definition is a formal series definition. Later, but not in this lecture, I will say how to define this for epsilon equals 1, for instance. But just observe that here, the right-hand side, because of this homogeneity property, it's nothing but the sum over g of fg of epsilon minus 1s. So in fact, let me write it. So this is why the right-hand side is not separately a function of epsilon on s. It's just a function of epsilon minus 1 to the s. So meaning that formally you could just set epsilon equals 1. But then it will, you need to see if this series can be summed. Is it convergent? So, right. So why do we want to call it?
What is fg in relation to sigma?
Sorry, there is a way to compute it a little bit like that with residues. Okay, you just press the button. Imagine for the moment topological recursion is a black box. You have a spectral curve, you press the button, it gives you fg. Okay, I don't have time to explain that here now, but it's just a simple computation of residues. It's so. No, okay.
So say it's a function, it's a function of the curve.
So it's a function of the curve. And for the moment, it's defined only for large curves. So it's a function of a curve, and that's what I said. We shall, instead of defining a tau function as a function of times, we define a tau function as a function of curves, and times will be viewed as local coordinates in the space of curves. So in fact, why do we call it a tau function? To explain why we call it a tau function, we have to say, so I mentioned that tau functions are defined by the fact that they satisfy some equations like Miwa-Jimbo equation or Hirota equations. So meaning that we have to take derivatives with respect to time. So we have to take deformations. So this is why, in order to explain why we can call it a tau function, we need to say how, we need to explain how to define deformations. So first let me, so it will be my third part, deformations. And first, let me call this S is the set of all spectral curves. So I say space, but in fact it's a category. The morphisms are just the morphisms of surfaces with where you send x to x in the. Okay, I will not define it as a category, but okay. So. Let me take first an example. And in fact, I will take my example here. And this example will be related to a KdV tau function. So example of spectral curve. Let's consider sigma, which will be CP1, or oh no, sorry, let's say sigma is C. X is the map from sigma to C, which to a point Z, so a complex number associates Z square. On Y, so basically x of Z equals Z square, and in particular dx equal 2Z dz, okay? Y of Z will be sum 1/2 of sum of tk plus 2 Z to the k. K equals 0 to, well, it could go to infinity, it could be a formal series, but let me stop at a certain maximum number d. Let's call it m. So that y dx, the one form y dx, is sum tk z to the k minus 1 dz. Let's call it m minus 2. Okay, and let's take the b, z1, z2. It's the b of the Riemann sphere, so it's just dz1, dz2 over z1 minus z2 to the square. So it's defined on the Riemann sphere. It's the unique form that has a double pole on the diagonal on the Riemann sphere. You can check easily that it's invariant under Möbius transformations of the sphere, under automorphisms of the sphere. Okay, so this will be related to KdV. Okay, and in this example, you see that, for instance, if you compute d over dtk of y, or of y dx, in fact, you see that it will be a one form. It will be just the one form z to the k minus 1 dz, so which is a meromorphic one form on sigma. And in fact, let me give a name to that. So let me give a name. M1 of sigma will be defined as the set of all meromorphic forms on sigma. It's an infinite dimensional vector space. So it belongs to M1 of sigma. So now we shall make use of a very useful, of a very useful tool, which is the form cycle duality. So the idea here that I wanted to say is that basically a deformation is really encoded in a one form. A deformation of a spectral curve is really related to the notion of a one form. Yeah.
How do we see that this example is related to KdV?
I will say it later. Just believe me for the moment.
The B comes out, right? The B is what uniquely specifies something related to KdV.
No, in fact, the B is really specified. So the B is, sorry. The B is related to the fact that you have a Riemann sphere, so there is no choice. You must choose that B on the Riemann sphere. There is no other choice. So, but, so believe me, if you compute the tau function that I wrote, this tau hat, for that curve, so you can compute all the FGs for that curve, they depend on those TKs. The tau hat that I defined depend on those TKs, and you can check that it is equal to the KdV tau function. And I will try to explain why it is really, that's true, but it is true. And more generally, if you take a compact curve where y has several poles, so here basically y has poles at infinity only. But if you have several poles, basically you would get a multi-component Kp if the curve is compact. If it's not compact, for instance, if you have logs, you can get tau data functions on all that. Okay. So what is form cycle duality? Well, this is the point. So you have a Poincaré duality, which just says that if gamma is a cycle, and omega is a one form, you have a pairing, gamma omega, which is just the integral of omega along gamma. So it's a complex number, so that defines the pairing. So which means that you can view the set of cycles. You can view basically gamma can be thought of as an element of the dual of the space of one forms. So a cycle is an element of a dual. Not all elements of a dual are cycles. The space of the dual of so this was an infinite dimensional vector space. Its dual is really very, very large, and it contains many things that are not cycles. So when you have a cycle, you can integrate a form. So in particular, B is a form in the variable, let's say Z2. It's a form in Z2. So when you integrate the Z2 variable, what remains is a one form in the other variable. So if you integrate, so if gamma is, for the moment, let me say gamma is a cycle. Later it will be a more general element of the dual, but you can define, let's call omega gamma of Z1. It's defined as you integrate Z2 on the cycle of B of Z1, Z2. So it's a one form of Z1. So it's a one form on sigma. If gamma is a true cycle, then this is indeed a holomorphic one form. Now, what happens if you take gamma as an element of a dual? In fact, this is a Hodge decomposition that I'm going to make. But so if gamma is an element of a dual, it is a one form, but usually it's not analytic. It's not even C0. It can be really bad. It can be really something very, very bad. So it may happen that for some elements of a dual, this is not a well-behaved analytic one form. It's not meromorphic. So let's take the subset of the dual for which you get something meromorphic. So let me define this. This is what I call the generalized cycles. Let me write it this way. M1 of sigma is the set of gamma in the dual such that omega gamma is meromorphic. So it's again a vector space, infinite dimensional, but it's much smaller than the dual. Much smaller than the dual. And in particular, true cycles belong to it. So, again, this board, no. So true cycles belong to it. So let me consider again my example of KDV, and let me give you some examples of those generalized cycles. So let's come back to our example, and let's come back to our example, and let me define this cycle. So let me define the cycle, the general cycle that I will call A infinity K, for K positive. It will belong to M1 of sigma star. So it means to define it, you need to say how you integrate a one form on it. So what is its action on a one form? So it means you need to say what is the pairing with any one form, which is denoted as A infinity K of omega, And by definition here, it will be 2 pi I minus 2 pi I residue when z goes to infinity, let me call it z prime, of omega of z prime multiplied by z prime to the power minus k. Okay, so it acts linearly on omega, so it's an element of a dual. It's an element of a dual, and let us see if it is a generalized cycle. So how does it act on B? So now you want to compute A infinity k of B z1 of, let me call it B z prime, and integrate z prime. What is it? It's minus 2 pi I, residue z prime goes to infinity. So you have dz prime. Let me put the dz in front, and then minus z prime to the square, and z prime to the minus k. Okay, and it's easy to see that at z prime going to infinity, there is no pole at all. It's perfectly analytic at infinity, so the residue is 0. But 0 is a meromorphic one form. So, so then this means that A infinity k is a generalized cycle, so it belongs to my M1. Now, similarly, let me define another one. B, let me call it B infinity k. Now for k larger than 1, it's defined in a very similar way. So B infinity k of omega will be a residue when z prime goes to infinity of z prime to the plus k, 1 over k, omega of z prime. Okay, that's my definition. And if you now integrate B of B of z prime, so now you get 1 over k residue at infinity of dz, so let me put the dz in front, dz prime over z minus z prime to the square, z prime to the power k. So you have to do the Taylor expansion at infinity of 1 over z minus z prime to the square, and it's easy to see that what you get is basically z to the k minus 1 dz, which is meromorphic. It is a meromorphic one form. It's a simple residue computation. I mean, you just do the expansion of 1 over z minus z prime to the square, and which means that B infinity k belongs also to M1 of sigma. But now this one gives something non-trivial, and this form is what I called B infinity k of z. So it's that form. So, no, it's that one. Okay. And just to record something about what we have for this KDV example, let me remark that if you compute integral over A infinity k of y dx, you get tk. So the tk's are the A-cycle integrals. And remember that d over dtk of y dx was, well, z to the k minus 1 dz, so it's exactly this omega b infinity k of b. So remember that. So that's the idea of what will happen in general. So what we have defined now, we have defined some generalized cycles, and I said that so M1 of sigma. So let me define something which is the intersection. So gamma 1 inter gamma 2 will be defined as integral over 2 pi I, integral over gamma 1 of omega gamma 2 minus integral over gamma 2 of omega gamma 1, so, which is minus gamma 2 inter gamma 1. And the space, so M1 of sigma together with that intersection is a symplectic space. And we have a map from M1 of sigma, so generalized cycles to meromorphic forms, which I will call B hat, which to a cycle associates what I called omega gamma, which is the integral of gamma of B. Okay, and just a remark is that the care of that map is a Lagrangian. Of course, because in the care, both omega gamma 1 and omega gamma 2 are vanishing, so clearly the intersection is vanishing. So and just another remark is that for usual cycles, this is the usual intersection. Okay, so why was that useful to do that? No. Why was that useful to do that? No, it's the wrong one. So I started by saying we shall study deformations. I said that deformations basically are d over dtk are related to the d over dtk of y dx. Deformations are meromorphic one forms. And now let's say that due to this form cycle duality, we shall consider now deformations as cycles rather than deformations will be looked at as cycles rather than one forms. So let me. So let me make, so in some sense, deformations, that's what I wrote at the, no, sorry, it's erased now. So a deformation of d over dtk of y dx is a one form, which can be realized as the integral of a cycle by B. I forgot to write in the theorem here that the map B hat is surjective. So every one form is the integral of B on a certain cycle. So I forgot to write it, and I'm not going to lower the blackboard. So every one form can be obtained as integrating B on a certain cycle, but so this is surjective but not injective because B hat has a kernel. And in fact, the kernel is a Lagrangian, it's huge, it's infinite dimensional. So it means there is not a one-to-one map from a one form to a cycle, but in fact, the converse is true. Given a cycle, you have a one form. So in fact, I will consider now, given an element, a deformation, so deformation, so an example of a deformation is a d over dtk. D over dtk is a deformation, but if you think of it, it's an element of a tangent space. So it's a tangent vector. Deformation, which I mean here, for me, it means tangent vector. So let me call D a generic tangent vector. So D is a tangent vector. It belongs to the tangent space of my space of spectral curve, a tangent space at my spectral curve S. So it's an element of a tangent space. And and I said you can somehow associate a cycle to it. But in fact, we shall do the converse. So instead of mapping the tangent space to the space of cycles, let me do the opposite and map the space of cycles. So now map the space of cycles to the tangent space. So which means that to any cycle gamma, I will associate, so I will go from M1 of sigma to the TS of S. So which means that to every gamma, I want to associate a vector, a tangent vector that I will call d gamma. Saying that it's a tangent vector, you just need to say how it acts on the data of your spectral curve. So you need to say what is d of y dx and what is d of b, d gamma of b. So by definition, so the definition of this is that d gamma of y dx will be what I said, it's omega gamma, so it's integral over gamma of b. So it's also what I called b hat of gamma. And I also need to say what is d gamma of b. So remember, b was a function of 2 points, b, p1, p2. So by definition, so this is really by definition of what is d gamma. Again, by definition of what is d gamma, this will be an integral over, let's say, a point q belonging to gamma of a certain form. It must be a form, it must be a one form in the variable that we integrate. It must be a one form in p1 and a one form in p2. So it will be, so let me choose omega 03 of my spectral curve S and evaluate it at p1, p2, p3, q. So that's by definition. That's a definition of how to associate, sorry, how to associate.
We only have 3 minutes left.
Sorry, okay. It takes time to raise and lower the boards. So that's.
It's not subtracted from.
Yeah, I know, I know. So, oh, by the way, with these examples of A and B cycles, it's easy to check that A infinity k intersection with B infinity k prime is just delta kk prime. So they form a symplectic basis. They form what's called, the TKs are Darboux coordinates. And in fact, that's why it's related to KdV. So now I just will write that. So there is a theorem, very useful, that d gamma of omega gn of S is the integral over gamma of omega gn plus 1 for every g on n. And that's the key to proving that the tau function that I defined satisfies Miwa-Jimbo equation. So this implies that d gamma log tau hat of S equals integral over gamma of sum over g equals 0 to infinity epsilon 2g minus 1 omega g1 of S. And this can be viewed. So if gamma is a usual cycle, so if gamma equals usual cycle, that I will call first kind, so meaning that omega gamma is a first kind form, it has no poles, then this is in fact Seiberg-Witten. This equation is Seiberg-Witten. If gamma is a second kind, so meaning that omega gamma has double poles but no residues, has multiple poles but no residue, exactly as those ones, then this is really Miwa-Jimbo. And if gamma contains also a third kind, so also first order poles with residues, then this is what I will call Bertholin-Malgrange, so which generalizes Miwa-Jimbo. So this justifies that tau hat can be called a tau function, and basically this is useful. This is enough to prove that this was really the KdV. Well, this is nearly enough to prove that this was the KdV tau function. So I'm running out of time, so I will conclude. So you can, in fact, so this is not exactly the tau function. There is some subtlety. But the tau function is a kind of Fourier transform of that, or if you want, a Witten averaging of that one, or vice versa. This one is the Witten averaging of a true tau function, which will also satisfy Hirota equations. And there is also a deep link with conformal blocks on Virasoro algebra, which I don't have time to explain. But so what I want to advertise is that this method of looking at integrable systems from the point of view of the geometry of cycles is extremely useful. It makes many things very, very clear. Instead of studying deformations, you just study cycles. You just study how they intersect on what are their periods. So basically the times are periods, the Hamiltonians are periods. And if you want to know how Hamiltonian decomposed on a certain basis, you just compute intersections. And everything becomes extremely simple, and it allows to compare many models which come from very different points of view, in particular from string theory or knot theory, like Jones polynomials. Many things can be put in the same framework. So I thank you for your attention.
Okay. We thank Professor Renard. Are there any questions? Yes?
So you mentioned that the kernel gives the Lagrangian,
Yeah.
but there are many theories where Lagrangians are not defined in the first place.
I'm not what?
There are many theories where Lagrangians are not defined in the first place, where you can only look at them from Hamiltonians, but not from the Lagrangians.
Yeah.
So what does that mean in that case?
Well, the kernel is always Lagrangian. But, okay, what I did not, okay, there are many things that I didn't have time to say, but the idea is indeed that, so if you see in this example, the A cycles were in the kernel, and the B cycles are in a complement of the kernel. So basically you have to make a choice of another Lagrangian here. It's not canonically defined, you make a choice. So here in this example of KdV, there is a kind of natural choice, but in general, there can be many different choices. And in fact, what I didn't have time to say is that the tau function depends on such choice. So you have to make a choice of Lagrangian.
And we thank Professor Renard again, and resume at 10 past.
Okay.